So at this point, I now have added text across the entirety of the project so far. However, there's another way to add animation or a style of text by using default options within CapCut. So what I'm actually going to go ahead and do is hide this particular text track that I have just by clicking on the eye icon in the timeline. And then over in our media panel with text selected, we have an option called text template. Now what this essentially allows you to do is use a whole host of preloaded text templates that have their own animation and own style added to it. So for example, if I go ahead and hit on chapter, we have a few options that we can hover over and see which we may like. None of these are necessarily something I'd use, so let's just go ahead and have a play around and see if I can spot something that I would actually use and might match some of the creativity that I've got. I quite like this one here called sci-fi. Let's go ahead and add this to track, and as you now see, I've got a text track layer called drama sci-fi. I'm just going to quickly drag this over to the very beginning of our content creation. And if I scrub on the timeline, you can see we now have this particular effect. I do like it, however, it may be a bit OTT for what we're trying to do here. I just want to quickly show you that this is an option. With the text template highlighted on your timeline, over in the adjustment panel, you now have a variety of tools allowing you to edit what's on the screen. So what I'll do is use this as an intro or a text title. So I'm going to give the project a name and let's call it The Game. I'm just going to quickly reduce the scale of this. So it's called The Game, and I think there's a word underneath called drama, and what I'll actually write is life as a man. And if you click underneath these particular sections on the drop bar, what you'll actually have is very similar options to when we add a blank text option. I don't necessarily like the gaps in between the lines themselves, and I can reduce this by just bringing the character size down to perhaps 30. This then should allow me to increase the font to 20. Again, I still feel like that's quite big, so I'm going to do this manually on screen in the media player and move this writing in position. And if I unhide the previous text that I've written, we've now got a pretty cool title. But I'm also starting to feel now that the text is quite overpowering that we've got underneath compared to the title. And we can go ahead and have a look at that shortly. But let's just quickly finish our title. So I'm going to hide the text track, click back on our title. I feel like this should be bold. I'm relatively happy with this. However, I do think this could perhaps be shorter. So I'm going to go into my timeline, just drag this back over. Let's unhide the text and start playing around with the text that we actually have currently, as I do feel it's quite overwhelming compared to the title. So the first thing I'm going to do is highlight all of this text. And I suppose one of the things that come to mind is reduce the opacity on the text just where the title is. So it seems like 35 or maybe even 30 works quite well. Okay, so what I've actually done here is I've repositioned the three subtitles beneath the title, which I've also repositioned in the middle. Let's go ahead and give this a watch.
Life as a man is not a walk in the park. It's like a video game. You start from absolute nothing. You start from zero. You have no intrinsic value, and it's up to you to level up your skills. You work on your fitness, your fighting skill.
I'm quite happy with that, although I do think I would finesse this even further, and maybe a recommendation would actually be to remove the three subtitles in its entirety, leave the title heading in, and then move over to the subtitles. That can work as well. What I wanted to get across is the ability to add templates over in the media panel just by clicking on text and then text template. There's a whole host of preloaded templates you can use. You can use them as subtitles, you can use them as titles, graphics, motions, whatever you want to use them for. Go ahead and explore. Let's get into the lesson that a lot of you have been waiting for, which is auto caption. Now, for many of you, it's a bit of a painstaking process to write out each individual narration as text. So what you can go ahead and do is go over to your media panel, and back in the text option, we also have the auto captions option. So if I go ahead and click on this, we are greeted by an auto caption screen, which if we go ahead and hit create, CapCut will now start creating captions based on the audio narrative we have within the timeline. We now have caption layers applied to our timeline. With everything already highlighted, we can straight away use the same tools in the adjustment layer. So for example, I can click on the font and change this into automatic marker, I'll go ahead and add the same preset style, increase the font size, and then reposition this in the middle. So if I scrub through the timeline, I now have text automatically added to my video.
Life as a man is not a walk in the park. It's like a video game. You start from absolute nothing. You start from zero. You have no intrinsic value, and it's up to you to level up your skills. You work on your fitness, your fighting skills.
And it does a relatively good job. If you want to ensure your captions stay on one line, then you have to go into the process we outlined in the previous lesson, such as splitting the particular layer and then removing parts of the word, but this is entirely up to you. It's a great feature to have, and it's pretty much the norm across all editing software tools. Auto Caption is available on CapCut, DaVinci Resolve, Final Cut Pro, and Premiere Pro. With that being said, this concludes our lessons on text.